Hello, my name is Tony. By 1976, when this film was released, westerns were out of favour. Star Wars had set the controls for the Heart of the Sun, and that's where Hollywood was going at warp factor dumb. Old established genres only had an impact if they were updated and reimagined as space operas. Traditional fare, once box office staples, didn't stand much of a chance anymore. Andrew V. McLaughlin, a workman-like director, had a history with westerns. The standard sort. Not for him the pulverising violence and savage emotional lyricism of Peckinpah, or the protracted operatic mayhem of Leone, but the cleaner-cut action and often sentimental mythology beloved of, say, John Ford. So it was something of a surprise when he turned in this resolutely cruel, harsh, and bloody a parable of frontier life, as it evolved into a brave new world of technological progress and shrinking horizons. There are some good things and some not so good things going for it. Let me first run through some of the good stuff. It takes cues from John Wayne's Big Jake, an aging central character who manifests the changes of growing older, needing glasses to read, aching joints, out of step with the encroaching modern world. There's a kidnap and pursuit in which the newfangled technology is easily short-circuited by the bad guys, leaving a forced reliance on an old-school approach. But that's okay by me if you're going to emulate. A latter-day classic Duke Wayne movie is a good pick in my book, Pilgrim. You've got two Hollywood stars with an impressive career past where westerns are concerned, Charlton Heston and James Coburn. Add a supporting cast that's at least halfway decent, Chris Mitchum, Michael Parks, the radiant Barbara Hershey, and staple bad guys, played by the likes of John Quaid, George Rivero, and Robert Donner. Jerry Goldsmith hands in a rousing and at times really quite impressive score, which, if it sounds familiar, is because it's not original. It's composed from a series of cribs from 4 or 5 of his previous western soundtracks. Still good though. The radiant, sharp and crispy sun-blasted cinematography is provided by Duke Callahan, who lends Robert Redford's Mountain Man action-adventure Jeremiah Johnson, and before that, the Burt Lancaster 60s classic The Scalp Hunters. The film is based on Brian Garfield's ultra-macho pulp western novel Gundown. Garfield is best known for penning Death Wish and its literary sequel Death Sentence. The Last Hard Men sticks relatively close to Garfield's original narrative for the plot, so there's that as a positive. So far so good, it all seems a well-rounded enough proposition, until it starts to take on that faint, wobbly pear shape in places. The screenplay is by someone called Guerdon Trueblood. He would go on to script the TV movie The Savage Bees and provide the storyline for Jaws 3D. Knowledge of his future projects simply confirms him as a bit of a fuckwit, and to some extent explains why his work is liberally peppered with hackneyed homilies and verbal cliches throughout. A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do sort of stuff. Why, used to be you could see to the end of the world out of that thar window. And Heston giving Mitchum fashion tips on growing his hair longer, as a man should have long hair. Apparently, short hair, he ain't no man. Someone should tell Jason Statham. And as a slaphead of long standing, it's a bit of a crack in the nuts for me also. Although when I first saw it, I did have long hair, so it's nice to know how manly I must have been back then. I think it's fair to say dialogue is not a strong point here. It runs and sounds like a series of churning verbal aphorisms roaming meaninglessly around in the head of a Walter Brennan character with Alzheimer's disease. Then there's the director and the choices he makes. McLaughlin was dubbed just another director for hire by an unimpressed James Coburn, and he's not too wide of the target. Coburn further stated he knew how to get the job done, but that's about all. On the plus side, he keeps the pace moving and handles the action competently, mostly. Yet when it comes to the graphic violence, he seems a little unsure as to how to portray it for best impact. Seems that one day, about halfway through making the film, he remembered that Sam Peckinpah used slow-motion techniques. The thought struck that, hey, I could do that. Then he chooses to use it for a scene where 2 of the bad guys chase Hershey down a hillside with rape on their minds. As they tumble, pratfall and goon about, the pursuit part of this segment takes 3 times longer, like a Benny Hill sketch in reverse. When they catch up with her, things go abruptly back to normal speed for the strangely fully clothed sexual assault, but the slow-motion aspect has drained all tension and power from it, ultimately a misplaced afterthought that served no positive purpose. There is some more slow-mo for the climactic confrontation between Heston and Coburn, but it's at odds with the style of the action scenes from about 75% of the film that's gone before. McLaglen's uncertain handling dilutes the potency of the blood-spurting carnage. Peckinpah knew that slow-motion scenes require creative cutting, smart and decisive editing to make them work dynamically, and even he lost it on occasion. It's a skill McLaglen or the editor seemingly lacks. The storyline is thus. It's the early 1900s and the West has motorised vehicles and telephones, and may soon have them thar flying machine doohickeys droning through the skies. Zach Provo, James Coburn, a half Navajo Indian murderer and thief, is toiling on a Yuma chain gang, working under the gun to lay railroad tracks. He stabs a guard to death with a railroad spike and blows another away with a shotgun. He and his gang of reprobates and cutthroats are free. You've got his second-in-command, Menendez, George Rivero, 19-year-old kid Shelby, Larry Wilcox, murderous rapist scumbags Gant, John Quaid, and Shiraz, Morgan Paul, black dude Weed, Thalmus Rasilala, and racist throat-slitting good old boy super redneck doofus Leroy, Robert Donner. Not the most refined, genteel, and socially sophisticated bunch then, unlikely invitees to the average cheese and wine soiree. Provo promises his gang a share of the stolen gold he's buried in 2 secret locations on reservation land. But first he wants to pay a visit to Gila Bend, a town in southern Arizona, to take revenge on his nemesis Samuel Burgade, Charlton Heston. Burgade is the lawman, now retired, who tracked down and captured Provo. Provo's woman was killed during his arrest, and throughout his years of incarceration, he is obsessed over torturing and killing Burgade. It's all he lives for. The gang under Provo's leadership make their escape downriver, jumping trains, stealing horses and clothing and guns. Leroy proves to be a liability, and his racial slurs about greasers and half-breeds fail to earn much affection from Menendez and Provo, considering their ethnic backgrounds, so they stab him to death, which saves the law a bit of a job. Burgade is living quietly with his daughter Susan, Barbara Hershey, who is considering marriage to clean-cut hydroponics guy Hal Brickman, Chris Mitchum. When he hears of Provo's escape, Burgade immediately offers his services to his successor, Sheriff Nye, Michael Parks. Nye has great faith in technology and modern policing methods, and believes Provo and his gang will be easily rounded up soon. His faith is sorely misplaced, as the band on the run continue to evade capture. Did you know that James Coburn appeared on the cover of the Paul McCartney and Wings album Band on the Run? If not, you do now. And if you did, you're no doubt wondering why I'm telling you this mindless shit. I don't have an answer. It's a digression. Sorry. Anyway, Burgade, figuring that Provo will be coming after him, persuades Nye to set a trap, letting it be known that a gold shipment will be arriving by train to fill the coffers of the Gila Bend Bank. Burgade, Nye, and a shitload of law enforcement officers will be ready and waiting for Provo and his men to try and hit the bullion. Right. Provo figures that Burgade would figure he would try to hit the bullion, and figures that Burgade would lay a trap. So instead he hits Burgade's house, physically assaults and kidnaps Susan, whilst Burgade is busy in town, until he figures what Provo has figured and figures that he's too late to save his daughter. Okay, I figure that's enough fucking figuring for one review, so I'm gonna figure out a way to circumnavigate it, figuratively speaking. Provo downs the telephone and telegraph lines, and he and the boys head out into rough country. Nye has no lines of communication with other law agencies, and motorised vehicles are no use for this type of pursuit. Time to go old school with a posse on horseback, Burgade back in the saddle, and Brickman insisting on coming along. Provo heads into the reservation where Nye has no jurisdiction. The posse turns back, leaving Burgade and Brickman to go it alone. Burgade theorises that Provo will want to make him suffer, kill him slowly, and he will hesitate to end things, which will give him all the edge he needs. Events escalate to a bloody final confrontation between Provo and Burgade, with Susan's fate hanging in the balance. How will it all end? Despite this being a more traditionally framed and mounted western with that typical high bright sun look and feel, it's quite mean and vicious in spirit and gorier in execution. Not that that's a bad thing. There is enjoyment to be had in watching Heston's grizzled ex-lawman as he faces up to the physical toll of riding out one last time. He uses every strategy and trick his experience allows him to get his daughter back. It's also refreshing that Chris Mitchum's character, initially portrayed as a bit of a wuss, knocks Heston unconscious when he is in danger of being drawn out into the open as Coburn unleashes his men to rape Hershey. The civilized panty waist lets the rape of the woman he is supposed to love proceed unchallenged to save Heston from himself and his instinctive reaction, on the basis that at least she's still alive. It's a crude and unforgiving choice, but one that he makes unflinchingly, and in so doing causes Heston to realise he has misjudged the tenderfoot, who is made of sterner stuff than he first thought. Mitchum later shoots the kid Shelby in the throat without hesitation, further confirming his manly mettle, despite being a short-haired ponce. The action, when it's not being unnecessarily hamstrung by slow-mo intrusion, is nicely choreographed, and the often gruesome deaths of the bad guys by bullet, knife and brush fire wickedly satisfying. Most of them have no redeeming features and are wholly deserving of their fates. This is also true of Coburn's character, who is unfortunately a one-dimensional construct, with little if any trace of humanity. Even Charles Bronson's black hole angel of death in Chateau's Land has a wife, child and brother about whom he cared, and was pursued by some obnoxious racist bigots dumb as dirt dicks in their hateful quest for blood and glory, which gave his cause, persona and responses some crucial fragments of sympathy and dignity. Provo has none of these facets to flesh him out, apart from one instance when he prevents Gant from raping a pregnant woman in front of her family, which is later neutralised as a good deed when he gives Gant and Shiraz license to rape Hershey's character in front of her father. Coburn felt that there was not enough nuance or sophistication in the script to justify Provo's vendetta against Burgade, and I have to say I pretty much agree with him. Really, it's a film about two men who want to kill each other. One justifiably provoked, the other not so much. Do I like it? Well, yeah, I do, with reservations. It was Hollywood's last notable attempt to update the conventional style of Western by adding more realistic violence and increased male aggression towards women. It's not as explicit as it could have or would have been if it had been placed in the hands of someone like Peckinpah. It's as though the general idea was to aim for a more seismic exploitational vibe like Soldier Blue, but no one had the guts or will to go all in with it. Least of all Andrew V. McLaglen, whose final theatrical Western project as director it turned out to be. It would be another 16 years until the last great old-style Hollywood Western and the last great old-style Hollywood movie per se would be released. Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. A long wait for one final payoff, but well worth it. Would I recommend The Last Hard Men? Mainly to those who like their westerns on the lurid side, enjoy a malicious revenge flick, and get some kick out of seeing two major Hollywood stars snarling and blasting away at each other. Heston and Coburn are always decent value, even if the material falls some way short. And, as I seem to be ever fond of pointing out these days, you could easily do so much worse. Thanks for your time and attention. I am always grateful for anyone who can find the time to respond by hitting like, didn't like, or leaving a comment. And of course, making the decision to subscribe to the channel, which does increase the potential and motivation for producing future content. Thank you for being there. For me, it's always a bonus.